On January 8, 1989, at London Heathrow International Airport, a small Boeing 737 aircraft operated by British Midland Airways was preparing for an evening domestic flight within the United Kingdom. The flight, operated by British Midland with flight number BD092, had a route from London to Aldergrove, covering a distance of 609 kilometers, with an estimated flight time of approximately 1 hour. The captain of the flight was Mr. Kevin Hunt, 43 years old, with 13,200 hours of flight experience, including 23 hours on the Boeing B737-400. He had flown for 763 hours on other versions of the Boeing B737, but had only recently switched to the B737-400, which was not widely used in the UK at the time. The captain had been working in the aviation industry for 23 years and was a seasoned pilot, with good health and regular flight checks, which were performed 2 months prior. The first officer was Mr. David McClellan, 39 years old, with 3,300 hours of flight experience, including approximately 53 hours on the Boeing B737-400 and 192 hours on other versions of the B737. Mr. McClellan joined British Midland in 1988 and had been working for the airline for less than a year. He had joined the aviation industry relatively late compared to other pilots and had been flying cargo planes for about a year before joining the airline. The plane had a total of 126 people on board, including 118 passengers and 8 crew members, most of whom were British and French nationals. The Boeing 737-400, with registration number GOBME, was the latest version of the aircraft and had been introduced into global operation by Boeing 4 months earlier. The plane was delivered to British Midland 85 days prior to the incident. "13 minutes after takeoff, flight BD092 was still climbing to its cruising altitude of 35,000 feet, equivalent to 11,000 meters. The aircraft was powered by 2 CFM56 turbofan engines produced by International, but Boeing made some modifications to this engine type to fit the B737-400. As the plane was passing through an altitude of about 28,000 feet, passengers and crew started to smell a burning odor somewhere in the cabin of the aircraft. The Boeing 737-400 had been modified significantly from its previous versions, making it difficult for the pilots to identify the cause of the problem, as they could easily confuse the new system with the old B737 system. In previous versions of the Boeing B737, compressed air from engine number 1, on the left side, was used to provide air to the entire passenger cabin, while compressed air from engine number 2, on the right side, was used to provide air to the cockpit. However, for the B737-400, engine number 1 provided air to the rear of the passenger cabin in the cockpit, while engine number 2 provided air to the front of the passenger cabin. A moment later, the smell intensified and strange noises started to accompany it, causing the pilots to become worried and investigate the cause. Suddenly, a loud noise shook the entire aircraft. The cause was due to one of the 36 fan blades of the engine number 1, on the left, having broken, causing the rotor to become unbalanced, which led to strong vibrations of the engine. However, engine number 1 did not completely fail. It still continued to produce thrust, but with less power than usual. Due to the shaking inside the cabin, the pilots could not clearly see which engine was having issues by looking at the gauges in the cockpit. Sensing the smell coming from the air conditioning system in the cockpit, the pilots believed that engine number 2 had failed. However, they were mistaken, as the air in the cockpit was being supplied by engine number 1, which was a new change on the B737-400. The auto throttle system was turned off. Passengers sitting by the windows were terrified as they noticed the plane was on fire, and within moments the tension spread throughout the cabin. Despite the ignition sparking, engine number 1 continued to run normally. Instead of shutting down the malfunctioning engine, the pilots made the wrong assumption and decided to shut down engine number 2, which was still functioning properly without their knowledge. The strong vibrations caused the crew to turn off the autopilot and perform an emergency landing. There was some sort of coincidence, as the smell inside the cabin decreased, which only reinforced their decision. The crew successfully obtained permission to make an emergency landing at a small airport in East Midland, just a 15-minute flight away. The fire gradually went out in engine 1. However, what worried the pilots the most was that the cockpit continued to shake. Fortunately, engine 1 still operated quite well for the next 15 minutes, allowing them to enter the final approach path of East Midland Airport. Flight BD-092 was arranged for a straight approach to ensure safety. To land, the captain had to constantly adjust the power of engine 1 to maintain a safe speed and lift for the plane. Passengers were instructed to keep their heads down during landing and quickly evacuate once the plane stopped. During the landing process, the captain pushed the power of engine 1 to a high level because, for the flight crew, engine 1 was not damaged. When the engine began to increase its thrust, there was a loud bang, and engine 1. The crew's last hope finally stopped working. The pilots tried to glide the plane to the runway as they were only a few kilometers away. After engine 1 stopped completely, the plane stopped shaking, making the captain realize the problem. He requested the co-pilot to restart engine 2, but it was too late, and the attempt failed. Flight BD-092 crashed into a highway when they were only a little over a kilometer away from the runway. 47 out of 126 people were killed, while 79 survived, but many were seriously injured, including both pilots. The captain had to use a wheelchair for the rest of his life. The accident caused Boeing to shake as its flagship product crashed just 4 months after its launch. The UK government cooperated with Boeing to investigate the accident, which was primarily due to pilot error. Both pilots were psychologically affected when the aircraft engine malfunctioned, leading to confusion between the B737-400 system and the older Boeing 737 models. In the end, they mistakenly turned off the engine that was still operating instead of the faulty one. They believed that the disappearance of the foul burnt smell indicated that they had correctly shut down the engine, but that was just a coincidence. After turning off the auto throttle system, both engines reduced power naturally, extinguishing the fire in engine number 1. Engine number 1 exploded because the fan blade had broken but still had to operate at high power during landing. All 99 Boeing 737-400 aircraft were banned from flying globally. Boeing adjusted the CFM56 engine, but only tested and studied it in the laboratory. That's why this engine had some serious flaws in the main fan blade, with signs of cracking and breaking at altitudes above 10,000 feet. Boeing collaborated with British Midland to compensate passengers. Both pilots were fired immediately after the investigation and had their licenses permanently revoked. Please leave your thoughts in the comment section below the video. If you find the video helpful and informative, please support us with a like and a subscribe. We look forward to seeing you in the next videos.